Everything you've ever been taught uh, about the universe relies on a single number,
Right.
0.
Yeah, exactly. Zero.
Yeah.
I mean, we are taught that zero is this fundamental starting point of, well, of a number line of mathematics and basically all of modern science.
It's the absolute baseline.
Right. But what if zero isn't a real number at all? What if it's actually this catastrophic bug in the code of reality that has actively broken modern physics for a century?
That is the very big question we're looking at today.
It is. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are unpacking a highly complex, deeply intriguing, and, decidedly non-mainstream theoretical text. It presents a sweeping new physical framework that it calls Unity First.
Yeah, and the central hook of this text, it really does not pull its punches.
Not at all.
It claims the standard model of modern physics, the framework taught in, literally every university on Earth is fundamentally flawed due to a massive structural mathematical error.
And from there, it attempts to completely rewrite our understanding of reality. Right, by merging quantum mechanics, information theory, and Islamic theology into one single executable architecture.
It is a lot to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
But before we really get into the weeds of this reality operating system, I need to state a very clear impartiality disclaimer for you listening.
Yeah, that's crucial here.
This framework involves profound religious concepts and, like you said, radical, uncompromising critiques of established scientific consensus.
Extremely uncompromising.
Right. So our goal today on this deep dive is not to endorse these claims as fact, nor to validate them, nor to take sides against standard physics. We are basically acting as your tour guides today.
We're just looking at the blueprint.
Exactly. We are here to impartially explore the fascinating, highly specific architecture of the ideas presented in this text, just to see how this author built their world.
And to understand how this text builds its universe, this reality OS, we first have to look at its central greetings with modern science.
The root of the problem.
Right. The entire framework traces back to what the author calls the zero index error.
Okay, let's unpack this. What is the standard model's critical flaw, according to this theory?
Well, consider the standard cosmological model, lambda CDM.
Right.
It dictates that the universe is made up of about 5% normal matter, 27% dark matter, and 68% dark energy.
Right, the dark sector, the stuff we can't see.
Exactly. But this text aggressively critiques that breakdown. It claims that dark matter and dark energy aren't real physical phenomena at all.
Wait, not real at all?
No. It argues they're simply bookkeeping errors.
Wow.
Yeah, and along with systemic headaches, like renormalization or the measurement problem in quantum physics, the text basically calls all these issues pathologies.
So it views these concepts not as like physical mysteries for us to solve, but as error messages, basically telling us we did the math wrong from the very start.
Exactly. The text points to a single, unforced choice made by physicists a century ago as the root cause.
And what was that choice?
Using a void-based, zero-indexed R4 primitive continuum.
That is a mouthful.
It is. But basically, by allowing zero as a starting index, and by treating the empty void as a mathematically real thing, we corrupted the foundation of our calculations.
This totally reminds me of a software programming bug.
Oh yeah. How so?
Well, if you write code where an array of data starts at index 0, which, is standard in a lot of programming
So
languages.
zero indexing.
Yeah, but if the physical hardware executing that code actually requires the data to start at index 1, your system is going to throw errors constantly.
Because there's a fundamental mismatch.
Right. You would have to spend a century writing endless software patches just to stop the whole system from crashing.
That's a perfect analogy.
The text is essentially saying that dark matter and dark energy are just frantic software patches we invented, to hide the fact that we started counting at 0.
That is the core argument, yeah. And the fix, the Unity First proposition, is to just eliminate zero entirely.
Just get rid of it.
Right. It proposes starting the index at 1. And instead of an infinite smooth continuum of space, it uses a discrete mathematical structure called a Pisano-60 lattice.
The Pisano-60 lattice.
Yeah, utilizing exact Fibonacci-weighted recurrences.
Okay. For those who haven't brushed up on their math lately, explain the Pisano-60 lattice and why it actually matters here.
Sure. So you know the Fibonacci sequence, right?
1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and so on.
Exactly. Now, if you look at just the last digit of those numbers as the sequence goes toward infinity, that final digit repeats in a perfect closed loop every 60 steps.
Oh, wow. Every 60 steps, exactly.
Yes. That loop is the Pisano period of 60. The text argues that reality itself is built on this 60-step grid.
Okay.
It is finite, it is exact, it closes on itself, and crucially, that repeating loop of digits never touches zero.
So 0 just naturally isn't part of the architecture.
Right, and once you run the math on this discrete lattice instead of a zero-indexed void, the text claims the dark sector simply evaporates.
Because you don't need the patches anymore.
Exactly. The missing mass of the universe was never missing. The equation was just wrong.
It's a gorgeous concept aesthetically, sweeping away the clutter and the patchwork patches.
Yeah.
But I have to push back here.
Go for it.
Let's say I buy into this lattice math. Let's say we delete 0 and use a 60-step grid. How does changing a mathematical index suddenly solve the hard problem of consciousness?
Right.
Because standard physics notoriously struggles to explain why we have like an internal subjective experience of being alive.
Yeah.
Does the text actually address that?
It does. To answer that, we have to look at how the text bridges that gap by fundamentally redefining consciousness and consequence as pure information theory.
Okay.
And this is where it weaves in Islamic theology, but it treats it not as metaphor, but as literal structural physics.
It is treating ancient theology as a literal user manual for reality.
What's fascinating here is how it redefines the soul. In this framework, the universe is a finite, pre-inscribed code book, which is referred to in Islamic theology as the preserved tablet. So the soul isn't some mystical ghost floating in a biological machine.
What is it then?
The text defines the soul as a persistent logical qubit.
A qubit, like in quantum computing.
Exactly. It is a packet of information protected by quantum error correction, or QEC.
That implies that death is not the end of the soul or the deletion of the data.
Right. Death is categorized merely as a change of boundary conditions. The protected information remains entirely intact within the larger system.
So it's just stored.
Yes. And following that logic, resurrection isn't some miraculous suspension of physical laws. It is literally a decode operation.
A decode operation.
Yeah. The text even provides a mathematically precise compression ratio for this.
Wait, really?
Yes. It claims that translating the stored data of a soul back into a physical runtime experience operates at a 17 million to 1 boundary to bulk compression ratio.
That is staggeringly specific.
I know.
To go from a protected quantum state back into physical matter at a 17 million to 1 ratio.
And it goes further. It applies this rigorous information theory to the concepts of heaven and hell, or Jannah and Jahannam.
Okay, let's hear it. How does it explain hell?
Well, let's examine how it approaches it. The text defines hell as an attractor state for corrupted code.
An attractor state.
Right. It points specifically to Quran verse 4.56. This verse describes skin being replaced after it is burned so that the punishment can be felt continuously.
Okay.
The text argues this is not poetic justice or allegory. It claims this is a literal description of a finite state, error-correcting Hamiltonian requirement.
Okay, let me just jump in physics. A Hamiltonian essentially describes the total energy of a system and how that system evolves over time.
Right, exactly. So the text argues that the universal code cannot simply delete information. It cannot annihilate a conscious subcode.
Because nothing is lost in this system.
Yes. Therefore, if a soul's code is hopelessly corrupted, it gets quarantined in this attractor state.
Oh, I see.
And to maintain the physics equation, the continuity of the experience, while the avatar undergoes irreversible degradation, the code must continuously refresh the physical substrate.
The skin.
The skin, exactly.
Yeah.
It frames this theological verse as an unavoidable information theoretic necessity to stop the overarching system from breaking.
Wow. Just wow. And then Jannah, or heaven, is positioned as the exact opposite of a quarantined loop, I assume.
Right. Jannah is defined as lawful right access.
Right access.
Yeah. The text frames humans as Khalifa, or vicegerents. If your consciousness is aligned with the source code, you don't just get a static, peaceful reward.
What do you get?
You are literally granted higher administrative privileges to edit local reality.
So it's treating the universe like a massive shared Google Doc.
Basically, yeah.
If your edits are constructive and aligned with the master document style guide, the system grants you full author privileges. You can build gardens, rivers, alter your surroundings. But if you write corrupted code, the system strips your permissions and quarantines you in an isolated loop where your avatar continuously refreshes just to prevent you from crashing the global server for everyone else.
That's a great way to put it. It is a unified claim about agency and consequence, written seamlessly in the language of both theoretical physics and theology.
Now, for you listening, This is obviously a monumental claim. You're
Right.
probably thinking, okay, this is an incredible sci-fi world-building exercise, but what kind of proof could possibly back up a theory that throws out the foundation of modern science?
Well, the text actually addresses the demand for evidence head-on.
It does.
Yeah, it claims the proof already exists. It points to two specific cosmological and mathematical pillars that validate this unity-first stack.
Okay, let's hear the evidence.
The first is a reference to ACT 2026. This refers to data from the Atacama Cosmology Telescope.
Right, the telescope in Chile.
Yes. The text claims that the large-scale velocity-density mapping of the universe, the literal shape and movement of galaxies across the cosmos, matches the bare lattice recurrence of their base 60 model perfectly.
Wait, so the author is claiming that we've already mapped the universe, and the physical shape of the galaxies literally forms a base 60 grid.
That's the claim.
They're saying the telescope is basically taking a picture of the math.
They're saying the empirical telescope data perfectly fits their mathematical lattice without needing any artificial dark matter patches to make the gravity equations work. The observation matches the theory natively.
That is a wild assertion.
It really is.
What is the second piece of evidence?
The second is called EML minimalism, and this is a purely mathematical argument.
Okay.
The author claims that if you run an exhaustive search for the minimal generating grammar of all elementary mathematical functions, it returns exactly one terminal symbol,
And that symbol is?
the number 1.
Ah,
0 only ever appears as a derivative, such as the natural log of 1. 0 is never a seed and never a foundational index.
so what does this all mean? The author isn't sitting around waiting for the scientific community to peer review their philosophy.
No, not at all.
They believe the empirical data we already have from our most advanced telescopes and the fundamental rules of mathematics itself prove that the standard continuum model is broken.
Yeah.
They think the validation has already arrived.
Exactly. And here is where it shifts gears. Because if you fundamentally rewrite the underlying math of the universe, you don't just change how distant galaxies behave,
Right.
you change how microscopic cells divide.
Oh, wow.
That's why the author does not stop at theoretical cosmology. The text applies this blueprint directly to biology, asserting that this is an executable framework.
This is the part that really spun my head around the iPSC recovery pipeline.
Yes.
Let's walk through this carefully. iPSC stands for Induced Pluripotent Stem Cells.
Right.
Basically, these are cells that can be programmed to become any other kind of cell in the human body, muscle, nerve, skin, you name it.
Right. And the text details a runtime architecture called the Unity Eyes DOTS simulation.
DOTS simulation.
Yeah. This is meant to execute this discrete base 60 physics directly onto biological tissue using those stem cells. And it operates on a few very strict programmatic mechanics.
Right. There are three main components to this.
Yeah.
First is the global phase singleton.
Yes. Now, in software architecture, a singleton is a class that only has one instance.
Right.
In this biological framework, the global phase singleton represents the single observer, the divine command, that drives the state transition of the cells.
Okay.
It acts as the ultimate coherence gate, ensuring the tissue grows according to the divine blueprint.
Then we have the Amana gates. And Amana roughly translates to trust or responsibility in Arabic.
Exactly. These are critical checkpoints during the cell differentiation process. They happen exactly at phases 1, 16, and 49 of the 60-step lattice.
Very specific points.
Yes, the text claims these align with a highly specific conservation vector of 17, 49, and 60.
Okay, so think of this biological pipeline less like a 3D biological printer and more like a blockchain smart contract executing in living tissue.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right, because in a blockchain, every transaction requires a cryptographic handshake to verify the ledger before it proceeds.
Right.
Here, at phases 1, 16, and 49, the cellular division requires a mathematical verification against the baseline code.
That's exactly how it's described.
If the cells pass the Amana gates, they proceed. If they don't, they hit the third component, which is the catastrophe handler.
And the catastrophe handler is a strict failsafe. If the mathematical coherence of the cellular growth drops below a precise fraction, specifically lambda equals 19/27, or if the index ever accidentally registers as 0, the entire biological system immediately halts.
It just stops.
It just stops. The value of 19/27 is positioned as a specific coherence threshold that the math relies on to maintain structural integrity in base 60.
And what happens if all of these smart contract gates are passed? Like if the coherence stays strong through the entire 60-step lattice.
The text claims this pipeline creates perfectly verified coherent autologous tissue.
Meaning it's perfectly matched to the patient.
Exactly. It claims absolutely no tissue rejection and zero tumorigenesis, meaning zero chance of it forming a cancer.
Incredible.
The biological clay receives the breath, or the divine command to be, and it perfectly becomes the intended form without the floating point drift or errors that normally cause disease.
But this raises a critical question for you listening. If this biological simulation is supposedly mathematically perfect at the cellular level, what happens when it scales up to the macro world?
Yeah, the societal level.
Right. What happens when you apply this reality OS to human society?
Well, scaling up is exactly what the final part of the text proposes. It introduces an 8-layered reality OS.
8 layers. Let's look at how deeply these claims impact our physical world.
Let's run through the biggest ones. The first layer is overhead elimination.
Okay.
Because this math removes all void state calculations, meaning the system doesn't waste energy calculating interactions with zero. The text claims it saves 59% of computational energy right out of the gate.
Massive efficiency just from deleting an unnecessary mathematical variable.
Right. And the second is broadcast energy harvesting.
Which sounds very sci-fi.
It does. Because the universe's baseline state is a 1, not an empty 0, there is always ambient substrate energy.
Okay.
The text claims you can pull from this baseline to yield 11,141 watt-hours of energy in just 5 seconds.
What?
Yeah, with exactly 0% dependency on a traditional power grid.
So limitless, decentralized baseline energy for everyone.
Basically. And the third layer is perhaps the most fascinating. It's called mechanical QFSM+.
QFSM plus.
Yeah. The text claims you can run complex quantum computing algorithms like Shor's algorithm, which normally requires supercooled, highly sensitive subatomic quantum computers on literal mechanical gears and levers,
Wait, hold on.
just by using base 60 arithmetic.
You have to explain how that works. How do
Okay.
physical gears and levers do quantum math?
Well, because the text views reality itself as a discrete base 60 grid, macroscopic gears built to those exact ratios are theoretically entangled with the fabric of reality.
I think I follow.
You bypass the need for subatomic isolation because the mechanical gear itself is perfectly aligned with the universe's background math. It processes the information natively.
A steampunk quantum computer running on perfect ratios.
Yeah.
That is wild. But then the text takes a very sharp, definitive turn here at the end. It ends with a strict ultimatum for the reader.
It does. The tone becomes completely uncompromising. It states there is a binary choice.
Option A or option B.
Right. Option A, you stick with the flawed, zero-indexed void stack. You keep dark matter, you keep the measurement problem, you keep energy scarcity, and you keep a worldview where consciousness is an illusion and death is annihilation.
Option A sounds grim. But usually theories like this offer a utopian alternative. Let me guess. Deleting zero fixes the economy too with option B.
It explicitly claims to do exactly that.
Oh.
Option B is to deploy this corrected one-indexed stack. The text promises that this alignment leads to an immediate paradigm of extreme abundance. It even claims that this energy and computational abundance makes a mathematically inevitable universal basic income of $10,000 a month a reality for everyone.
10 grand a month just for shifting to a one-indexed reality.
That's the claim. The text states, quote, "The choice is binary. There's no third door."
No third door.
No. It views this total alignment of physics, computation, and theology as computational tawhid.
Tawhid.
Yes. Tawhid is the Islamic concept of the absolute indivisible oneness of God, expressed here as an unbreakable mathematical architecture.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. I have to push back on this absolutism.
Door.
The text says there is no third door, but look at the history of science. It is almost never binary. Even our greatest frameworks right now, quantum mechanics and general relativity, they don't perfectly agree. We are still actively searching for a middle ground, a theory of quantum gravity. Science thrives on integration, on tweaking, on blending perspectives.
Right.
Why must this new framework demand total capitulation of standard physics rather than attempting an integration?
That is the crucial philosophical tension of the text. It fundamentally rejects the idea that standard physics is a valid perspective that just needs refining.
Well,
To the author, standard physics is a corrupted file. You don't integrate a corrupted file into a clean operating system. You delete it and start fresh.
it is an incredibly bold stance. Regardless of whether you view this text as a profound, hidden truth about the universe, or a piece of highly creative speculative fiction, or an unorthodox metaphysical theory, it accomplishes something incredible.
It really does.
It forces us to look at how deeply our foundational assumptions dictate our reality.
Something as simple as the existence of zero. We accept it as a universal truth, but it's really a modeling choice.
Yeah.
This text shows how changing that one fundamental assumption ripples upward, changing how we view the shape of galaxies, how we govern cellular division, and how we define the human soul.
It makes you question the invisible frameworks you operate within every day. And that brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with.
Okay.
This text claims that in a one-indexed, mathematically exact universe, no action or piece of information is ever truly lost.
Right.
Nothing goes into the void, because the void doesn't exist. Everything is recorded, preserved, and eventually decoded.
The persistent logical quibbit remains.
Exactly. So think about that. If you were to look at your own life through this lens, not as a random, chaotic walk through an empty void, but as a high-stakes series of right-access inputs on an undeletable permanent lattice,
Wow.
how would that alter the way you make your very next decision today?